Welcome to Buckeyes Tomorrow Morning for Saturday, September 9th. I'm your host, Tom Orr. The Youngstown State game is today, the game against Michigan in 77 days. We will be at that Youngstown State game. We'll have a little bit of pregame something or other for you coming up a little later on in the morning on our YouTube channel at youtube.com/Buckeye Huddle. We'll try and get the availability report out as soon as that drops, and maybe a little bit of a game preview. If you want to hear a full game preview of that, you can hear Tony Gerdeman and I break that down on the Buckeye Weekly podcast episode that dropped on Friday. So that's the Buckeyes and Youngstown State. That is probably, arguably, not the most consequential game of the day. There's a little tussle happening down in Tuscaloosa we'll get to in a little bit, but want to get you through maybe 5 to 7 of the other biggest games going on this weekend. We're going to do that with Tony Gerdeman of Buckeye Huddle. Tony, I guess let's start with the opponent that everyone is kind of just constantly talking about for Ohio State anyway, Notre Dame. That game's still 2 weeks away. They are playing at NC State this weekend. North Carolina State did not look great against East Coast power UConn last week. That game's at noon on ABC. Notre Dame, a 7.5-point favorite. I had looked at this as, okay, they'll have a real good test under their belts before they get to Ohio State. Now, maybe.
I think UConn is going to be difficult for some programs this year just because they're annoying. But I'm interested to see NC State's offense. Brennan Armstrong was the high-powered quarterback at Virginia in 2021 and a low-powered quarterback at Virginia in 2022. The 2021 season, he threw for like 4,400 yards, was injured for the Notre Dame game, so we didn't get a chance to see him play against the Irish, so this will really be our first chance. He's a dual-threat guy, can keep things alive, so I think he's going to give some issues, provide some issues to the Notre Dame defense, but I see this as I don't like the 7.5 aspect of this, but I think everybody is getting on board with Notre Dame, despite the fact that Navy and Tennessee State aren't exactly the most convincing of opponents. But this one, I don't feel great about it because I don't know enough about either team based on what we've seen so far.
Yeah, this is very much still in the data gathering portion of the season. It is so weird that Virginia's old quarterback is still playing in the ACC at NC State, and Wake Forest's old quarterback is still playing in the sort of ACC adjacent Notre Dame. It's like everyone just take one step to the left, and now you have your new quarterback this year. We'll see if Utah has a new quarterback on Saturday, meaning their old quarterback, Cam Rising. He missed last week's game against Florida. I have not seen an injury update on him, but without Cam Rising, no problem for the Utes as they took care of Florida last week. Up in Salt Lake City. Now they take on a team. They head on the road to play Baylor, and Baylor is a team that did have some problems last week. Oh boy, did they have some problems. They lost to Texas State. They look, Tony, like they've got some issues in the trenches. Utah does not feel like a team you want to play when you are having issues in the trenches.
And this is only a 7.5-point line. So you're asking why it should be more than that based on the physicality of Utah, the lack of physicality of Baylor. Would they give up 42 points, 42-31 to Texas State?
Something like that, yeah.
This line kind of feels like a poison tree frog. It's very bright, and it's just how cute. Look at this, and it's like actually it's cute and it's bright because that means it's poison. That's don't touch it. Don't get any of it on your skin. You will have paralysis. So that concerns me. But if you look at it like how things happened and unfolded last week, how is this not Utah by more than 7.5? Yeah,
that looked like a what am I missing line, and I'm still willing to sort of step in that bear trap and say, give me Utah. If you can still get it at 7.5, that's great. It was up to 8 as of midday Friday or so the last time I looked. So yeah, that you would not, if you jump on Utah, you will not be the only one jumping on Utah. And speaking of licking frogs, Colorado hosting Nebraska. Colorado, a 3-point favorite, and that line has just jumped and jumped and jumped and jumped as the week has gone on. If you jump on Colorado -3, you will not be the only one in America. You may have 150 million other people or so joining you on that particular bandwagon. That's a noon game on Fox. At some point, Tony, at some point we're going to know whether we learned more about Colorado or TCU last week. I still don't think we really know. I think everyone has drawn a lot of conclusions about Colorado, and I was very surprised about that outcome. It's real possible TCU might be real bad, and Nebraska played a decent Minnesota team last week. I mean, I don't think Colorado -3 is an absolute freebie here.
No, but I think what you do have is a Colorado team that found a way to win last week against a Nebraska team that found a way to lose. And this game being in Boulder, I think it's the homecoming, it's the welcome home for this team, this Colorado team that took the nation by storm last week, but did it on the road. Clearly there's still plenty of confusion and concern about exactly what is Colorado. You've got the 3-point line here. Shedeur Sanders, Colorado quarterback, threw for over 500 yards last week. Like the over-under on his yardage total this week is like 320 something because people are just like, I don't know. Like you don't expect 500 yards, but you probably, is Colorado a 300-yard passer or 350-yard passing team now? They couldn't run it last week, so they may only have to be able to pass it. So I'm fascinated to watch this one maybe the day after, I guess, based on where we will be. But I got burned by Colorado last week, so I'm just going to stay away from them for a while.
All right. The SEC got burned by a couple different teams last week. 3, in fact. South Carolina lost to UNC. Florida, as mentioned, lost to Utah. And LSU, oh boy, LSU had a second half against Florida State, one for the ages. Now they've got another team that's in maybe a little bit of an interesting spot. That's Ole Miss going on the road to play Tulane. Rebels favored by 7.5, 3:30 on ESPN2. This is one they should win. But, it feels like you always get, the early season narratives, and sometimes it ends up being an overreaction. But that was 3 losses in, the 3 competitive SEC games last week. They lost all 3 of them. And if Ole Miss somehow stumbles here, this feels like this could become a little bit of a national talking point everywhere outside of the Sweet Tea Belt.
A couple of SEC teams favored on the road against decent enough teams. This Tulane being one of them, top 25 ranked. Pretty good defense. With the running game that Ole Miss we know they have with Quinshon Judkins, they didn't really need him last week against an easy opener. I think it was, I don't even remember who it was.
Mercer.
Yeah. So, they didn't need him much. I would expect him to be busy this week and, 25, 30 carries, something like that if they need it.
All right. And then one of the other SEC teams going on the road and playing a halfway decent opponent, Texas A&M at Miami. That's 3:30 on ABC. Texas A&M favored by 4. Boy, oh boy, Tony, this is going to be a fascinating one because one of these teams is going to lose, and one of these coaching staffs that has a whole bunch of NIL working behind him is going to have to explain to boosters and everyone around him. So what happened was this is, neither of these teams I think are college football playoff teams this year, but they're both kind of interesting teams narratively in the sport. What do you see happening here? Because it feels like Texas A&M is probably more talented, but that said, I don't know what I actually expect to see on the field.
That is the problem with Texas A&M and Miami. Anytime one of those teams is involved, you just don't know. And then you put them both together, and it's like a double negative. But I don't know if this double negative really equates to a positive. We'll see. But I think you've got 2 perhaps future NFL quarterbacks who could maybe turn this into a little bit of a shootout. I think with the overall skill, it's just, is the Texas A&M defensive line that was bought and paid for, is that ready to take control against the Miami offensive line? That sort of thing. What will we see? I think after the fact, some finger pointing from one of the groups, and in terms of which NILs are unhappy, the coaches will be like, why did we lose? You didn't pay enough. That's why we lost. This is mainly on the collectives for not getting the job done. We can only coach the players that you bring us. So if you want to be involved, if you want to be the guiding light of this program, then the collectives need to share the blame.
You wanted ownership in the program. Congratulations, you've got it. You're gonna have a loss on this year's taxes. That's okay. Well, it's all right. It'll be fine. So yeah, that'll be an interesting one to watch. I'm going to skip ahead. I'm going to skip past the 7:00 game that we are probably going to talk a little bit more about, and we're going to go straight to 7:30 on ABC. Wisconsin at Wazoo. I had forgotten that the Cougars went into Madison and won last year. I think it was 17-12 or something. Really, not a great game. Very, very different Wisconsin team this year with Phil Longo's offense and Luke Fickell running the show and Tanner Mordecai at quarterback. This is another one where Wazoo is one of those places that I just sort of assume weird stuff is going to happen. So on paper, yes, Wisconsin should win, but it's in the Palouse. What are we expecting here?
Yeah, all over the globe there are like triangles of mystery. This is one of those triangles of mystery where ships go missing, teams go missing, and I'm with you. This is a revenge game, at least, like you said. I do think it's funny that we talked about Wisconsin going to a passing game and implementing this passing game, and they still rushed for 314 odd yards last week. So they still have that. They have two good backs. Maybe that eliminates some of the mystery, but Wisconsin, they don't have great success against the Pac-12. They've lost their last 3 games against the Pac-12 in regular season, and you're talking about games like Arizona State and Oregon State, and it's just something they've done throughout their history. Not that has anything to do with what is happening today, but I do wonder if Luke Fickell's defense is ready. Cameron Ward, the Washington State quarterback, threw for like 450 yards last week, rushed for another 40. So yeah, I think he's going to give them trouble. I think this one, I don't think I've ever said this before about Wisconsin, or I've said it before about Washington State, but I think we might be able to see somewhat of a shootout in this game because of the offenses.
Yeah, I think there's a possibility of a shootout there. It's just with it being the first year and so many new faces for Wisconsin, and then also going across the country, that just feels like you're setting up for something really weird to happen. That's just sort of sometimes you can just sort of smell it coming, and that just feels like something deeply stupid is going to happen here. Speaking of something deeply stupid happening, before we get to Alabama, Texas, we got to talk a little bit about the Cy-Hawk game, Tony. Iowa at Iowa State, 3:30 on Fox. Iowa is a 4-point favorite, but perhaps more importantly and more telling, have you looked at what the over-under is?
In fact, I have, and as the time we are talking about it now, I see it at 36.5, and anything under 40 obviously is crazy. Anything under like 38, and you're like, how is this possible? But then seeing it at 36.5, you're like, well, is 20-17 considered a high scoring game for Iowa State? And it kind of feels like it is.
Yeah, that's a game where it feels like you end up with someone scoring 15, like suspiciously often. Like you're due for an 11er in that game at some point. Yeah, that's going to be that's always just, I mean, I always call the Egg Bowl, Ole Miss and Mississippi State, America's stupidest rivalry, and it really truly has earned that over the years. But man, the Cy-Hawk game it's up there. It's just two in-state teams, and it is always just an absolutely bizarre game. There was one that ended up 41-30 something, I think, a couple of years ago that was I think sent the earth wobbling on its axis. There's a lot of like 15-10 and 17-13 in this series history. I think last year Iowa State won for the first time in like 6 or 7 years, and I think it was like 10-9 or something along those lines. Yeah, that is always it's a uniquely college football game. That's probably the kindest way I can say that. And then decent teams, it's just they play a game that is just there's no correlation to that anywhere in the NFL that I'm aware of.
Feels like Tom feels like 22-15. So take the over, and whoever scores the touchdown wins.
Oh man, yeah, 10 field goals and 1 touchdown. It has to be a defensive score, though. I mean, keeping with the spirit of the game, it has to be a defensive score.
So Iowa,
yeah, maybe it could be a special teams. We'll see. All right, okay, we've kept the good people waiting long enough, Tony. Texas at Alabama, 7:00 on ESPN. Alabama a 7-point favorite. Jalen Milroe looked better than I expected last week. What are you expecting here? I just, in these games, I kind of need to see Nick Saban lose and out, a high profile out of conference game on something of a regular basis before I ever would pick against Alabama in a game like this.
Well, do you know what happens every time Alabama plays Texas, Tom? Alabama starts to get into trouble, and then they injure the Texas quarterback. They did it last year against Quinn Ewers. They did it in the 2009 national championship game with Colt McCoy. So this is what happens. They start to get nervous. They go Jeff Galooly on people, and then boom, you bring in the backup Texas quarterback. But hey, maybe that's Arch Manning now. So, the beloved, beholden Arch Manning. I like Alabama here. I think we could see some scoring in this one. I'll need to see more from Jalen Milroe in terms of playing a competent defense. The fact that it was a 3 or 4 man race basically in camp at quarterback is a little concerning. But I think Quinn Ewers is going to be able to throw the ball around. He's got some talented wide receivers. I'm wanting to see more from the Alabama defense. It's been a while since they've been an Alabama defense, I think, in the secondary. So let's see exactly what they've got there. So I think over under 54. Like I'm not avoiding taking the over on that one. I think we're going to see some scoring in this one.
Yeah, it should be two pretty good offenses. I wonder if Alabama is maybe transitioning to a little bit more of a, run, a little heavier in terms of the run than they have been in recent years with Bryce Young, because you don't have, this is a program that's going through something like what Ohio State's going through, where you don't have CJ Stroud, you don't have Bryce Young anymore. Is the new guy going to be a top 5 draft pick? I don't know, maybe, but it's not a definite yes yet. So we'll see. We'll see how that goes. Quinn Ewers has been talked about as a top 5 draft pick. We'll see if it actually plays out on the field. He was off to a great start last year, as you mentioned, got hurt. And then, you had lots of people projecting, well, if these trends continue, then, Texas would have scored, 700 points against Alabama last year, which those trends don't tend to continue over the course of the game. So we'll see if they continue over the course of the game tonight. That'll be a lot of fun to watch. Before we get there, you've got Ohio State, Youngstown State to watch. Then you've got our full post-game coverage to watch after that. Don't worry, we'll get you done long before Texas and Alabama. Kevin will pull the plug long before the Texas-Alabama game starts. He wants to be home to watch, so we will diligently follow his lead and do that. So don't you worry, you'll have time to watch all of the great stuff today. Coming up, we'll have make sure you are subscribed to our YouTube channel. There are people, I've heard people say that maybe they're not getting notifications. If you're not getting notifications on that YouTube channel, hit that bell. Make sure you're see if it goes off and then click it back on. Sometimes you might need to just kind of reset it. I don't know, the YouTube equivalent of unplugging it and plugging it back in. I don't know why it works. It apparently just works. So go ahead and do that. And also make sure you find us at BuckeyeHuddle.com. We have lots of coverage of the Buckeyes, lots of coverage of recruiting. There are a couple recruits who are going to be visiting, a couple recruits of note who are going to be visiting later on today, and we will be keeping an eye on them in terms of our guys on commitment watch. We'll probably talk to some of our recruiting guys a little bit early next week to kind of recap what we learned over the weekend. But recruiting stuff coming, scheme stuff coming, team stuff coming, all for you at BuckeyeHuddle.com. That will do it for today. Thank you guys all for joining us. Have a great day. Enjoy the football. We'll talk to you tomorrow.